The hallway was dim, lit only by the dying light of the day spilling through the narrow window over the stairwell. I could hear my heart in my ears, louder than the creaking floorboards beneath our feet. He took a small step forward, slow, measured, almost hesitant, like if he moved too fast, it would shatter the fragile silence between us. I didn't move. Couldn't. My hand was still resting on the banister, but my eyes were locked with his. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. I should have turned away. I should have walked back into the kitchen, back to whatever I was pretending my life still was. But I didn't. His face leaned in, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath, close enough that I forgot, for just a moment, who he was, and who I was supposed to be. And then the front door slammed open. "Babe?" My husband's voice shattered the quiet like a stone through glass. I stepped back, fast. "Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal?" It started with rain. Heavy, southern Georgia kind of rain, the kind that soaked your jeans in 5 seconds flat and made the air feel like soup. It hit the windshield in thick sheets as I sat in the driveway, staring at the house like it was a stranger's. I wasn't ready to go inside. I watched the porch light flicker once. Then again. Inside, I knew dinner would be cold by now, and the kitchen would smell like burnt garlic bread. The oven timer always failed to get my husband's attention. But tonight, he wouldn't be home in time anyway. Meeting ran late, he'd texted. Third time this week. Same excuse, different night. I opened the car door and rushed through the downpour, barely making it under the awning before it hit again. My hands were full: tote bag, grocery sack, umbrella I didn't use. I reached for the doorknob just as it opened from the inside. There he was. My husband's father. Holding a dripping suitcase. "They said 3 weeks," he muttered, stepping back to let me in. Roof collapsed. Flooding. I tried a hotel, but they're all full. I nodded, forcing a tight smile. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. Same eyes as his son. Same voice, roughened with age but still grounded. "I didn't mean to drop in like this." "Your family," I said, because that was the thing you say. "Of course." The first 20 minutes were a blur, finding fresh sheets, clearing the guest room, digging out towels. He offered to sleep on the couch. I said no, like a good daughter-in-law. When I finally put the groceries away and made tea, he was already on the porch, watching the storm. He turned slightly when I joined him. "You always keep chamomile around?" "It's my go-to escape plan." He smiled at that, slow and tired. "Wish it worked for roofs." The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon. Not the store-bought kind my husband usually microwaved, but the old-fashioned, cast-iron kind. The sound of it crackling in the pan stirred something in me I didn't expect, not hunger, but a memory. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was there, apron and all, humming something old and bluesy. He turned, spatula in hand. "Hope you don't mind." Couldn't sleep. The house was warm. Alive. He talked about fixing up the back porch. Said the boards were rotting near the step. My husband had promised to repair them 6 months ago. "He's been busy," I said. The man looked at me, quiet for a beat. "Busy's just another word for somewhere else." That afternoon, I found my husband's favorite shirt in the laundry, the crisp white one he wore on date nights back when we still had those. It smelled like a stranger. Not cologne. Something sweet. Floral. And definitely not mine. I stared at it too long. That evening, he came home late. Again. Tapped his keys on the counter, kissed my cheek like someone checking a box. He nodded toward his dad, who was pouring a bourbon. You're settling in? Trying not to be a nuisance. You're good. My husband disappeared into his office. Door shut. I glanced at the bourbon bottle. Then poured one for myself. The next day, I came downstairs to find the two of them in the living room. The TV was on mute. Football. Morning, I said, mostly to the room. My husband didn't answer. But his father did. Morning. Want to help me pick up a few things at Home Depot? Your porch light's flickering. He said it like it was his house. I almost said no. But something in me said go. The ride was short. But the silence wasn't empty. It was comfortable. Like a pause you didn't need to fill. He hummed along to a Springsteen song on the radio. I watched the rain smear across the windshield. In the aisle between light bulbs and tools, he handed me a box of LEDs. These'll last longer. You sound like you've done this a lot. He smiled. Didn't get these wrinkles from sitting around. When we got back, the porch light stopped flickering. The backyard felt newer. The kitchen smelled like lemon polish. That night, I reheated lasagna. My husband came in, checked his watch. I ate already. I didn't ask where. After he left the kitchen, his father helped me clear the table. Not because he had to. Just because he saw me. He stacked the dishes beside the sink, reached for the sponge, and stopped. Can I ask something? I nodded. Are you okay here? I froze. I know it's none of my business, he added quickly. But I see how he talks to you. Or doesn't. The plates clattered louder than I meant them to. I apologized. He didn't press. We both knew the answer. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. Something in me felt different. Off balance. I went into the laundry room and found the shirt again. Same scent. Same silence. But this time, I noticed something else. A faint smear of lipstick on the collar. Not mine. And not from a colleague's hug. I held it up to the light, and that's when I realized the twist. The lipstick shade was familiar. Too familiar. Because I'd seen it before, in my own bathroom. But not on me. It belonged to a guest who came over 3 weeks ago. My husband's coworker. The one who laughed a little too hard at his jokes and touched his arm a little too often. She borrowed it from me. Said she forgot hers. And I had let her. I stood there, staring at the collar, hard in my throat, as everything around me clicked into place. The late meetings. The perfume. The indifference. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being replaced. And the worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was how carefully he'd hidden it in plain sight. The lipstick stain still haunted me the next morning. I kept replaying the moment she borrowed it. Casual, friendly, almost forgettable. And yet now it was the loudest memory in my head. I held the shirt again, staring at it like it might suddenly offer me a better explanation. It didn't. Downstairs, voices were already coming from the backyard. The grill was being prepped, laughter floating through the open kitchen window. I checked the time. Labor Day. My husband had insisted on a barbecue, invited half the street, it seemed. I hadn't even remembered until I saw the charcoal on the counter. I stepped outside to see him handing tongs to his father. Let him handle the ribs, he said with a grin. Old man's got secrets. He didn't look at me. Not once. The patio was already buzzing. Folding chairs unfolded. Paper plates stacked on the table. Country music playing too loud. I moved through it all like a ghost. Friends greeted me, but their voices were just noise. My smile was automatic. A while later, I noticed my husband had vanished. No trace. Not a single person asked about him. Not even his father, who just kept flipping ribs and humming along to the radio. Someone yelled from the back fence that the sauce had run out. "I'll go," I said, too fast. Before anyone could argue, I was already walking toward the driveway. Then I heard footsteps behind me. "I'll come," he said. The ride to the store felt oddly quiet. No music, no radio. Just the sound of the air conditioning battling the heat. He finally broke the silence. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep much," I replied. He glanced sideways but didn't push. Instead, he said, "I used to get like that. When I knew something I didn't want to admit." I looked at him. The lines on his face weren't just from age, they were from living. "Do you ever stop noticing?" I asked before I could stop myself. "No," he said. "But you get better at hiding it." At the store, we moved without thinking, a rhythm we fell into without realizing. He grabbed a basket. I found the sauce. He added an extra pack of coals. I threw in a bag of chips no one asked for. Neither of us talked about it. Walking back to the car, he paused. "This is weird, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah. But I don't want it to be." "I know," I said. And we left it at that. When we got home, the party was still going strong. Kids ran barefoot across the lawn. Someone spilled lemonade on the deck. My husband was back now, suddenly present, handing out drinks and cracking jokes too loudly. "Long line at the store?" he asked as I passed him. I didn't answer. Just went inside with the bag and let the screen door slam behind me. He followed a few minutes later, coming into the kitchen with a bottle in hand. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I'm just tired." "You sure that's all it is?" I didn't answer. He chuckled. "You're acting like someone died." I turned to face him. "No one died. But something's definitely rotting." He raised his brows, tilted his head, then walked off like the conversation hadn't mattered. Like I hadn't spoken at all. Later, after the guests had gone and the folding chairs were stacked, I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up. I didn't want to go upstairs. I didn't want to see my husband undressed like a stranger. He walked past me without saying goodnight. But the one who stayed, the one who picked up the extra cups and wiped the grill down without being asked, was him. We stood in the kitchen, the fluorescent light making everything look colder. He handed me the last glass to dry. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just figuring things out." He paused. "You don't have to do it alone." I set the towel down. "Sometimes it feels like I already am." He looked at me then, really looked. Not through me. Not past me. Just at me. Like I mattered. We didn't move. We didn't speak. But in that moment, something cracked open between us. And then we kissed. It was quiet afterward. No words. Just breath. Just stillness. Then he turned away, walking slowly down the hall to the guest room. I stayed there in the kitchen, holding the counter like it might explain what had just happened. I didn't sleep that night. My husband didn't notice. The next morning, I went out onto the porch. The sun was too bright. The air already thick with heat. He was there, sipping coffee. We didn't talk about the night before. We didn't need to. He offered me a cup. I took it. The silence between us wasn't empty now. It was charged. Heavy. Inside, My husband was getting ready for work. He yelled something about forgetting a file. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I watched him through the window as he pulled out of the driveway, tires squeaking slightly as he reversed too fast. He didn't look back. I turned to go inside and nearly tripped over the laundry basket I'd left by the stairs. A shirt lay on top. The same white one. I froze. This time, I checked the collar carefully. No lipstick. But tucked inside the folded fabric was something else. A receipt. From a hotel 2 towns over. Paid in cash. 2 nights ago. I hadn't even known he was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, holding the slip of paper like it weighed more than it should. That's when I realized. He wanted me to find it. He was leaving breadcrumbs. But for what? For me to fall apart? Or to finally push me to make a move he didn't have the nerve to? It hit me then. He was setting the stage. Not for a reconciliation. But for an exit. And I had no idea who was supposed to be holding the final curtain. The hotel receipt stayed folded inside my pocket the entire morning. I moved through the house like I was underwater, not quite hearing anything, not quite seeing straight. The kitchen buzzed with the normal sounds, coffee percolating, a weather report muttering from the radio, footsteps upstairs. But nothing sounded real. He came down late. Hair wet from the shower. Shirt half-buttoned, tie slung around his neck like an afterthought. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and stuffed it in his bag. No kiss. No good morning. No eye contact. And I didn't speak either. I just watched him go. I waited until the door closed. Then I took the receipt out again and flattened it on the counter like evidence in a trial that no one would ever hold. The date. The room number. Paid in cash. He'd made sure of that. No emails. No paper trail. Except this. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. I didn't know why yet, but he wanted me to know. Not everything, but just enough. He was pushing me toward a conclusion I hadn't reached. Not yet. By noon, I couldn't sit still. The air in the house felt too tight. I walked circles through the living room, picked up objects just to put them down again. I finally gave up and grabbed my keys. I needed to get out before I exploded. The hardware store wasn't far, and I made up a reason to go. Paint samples. A new broom. Anything. When I opened the door to leave, I nearly ran into him, his father. He was standing there, hand raised to knock. Oh, I said, stepping back. I was just heading out. He hesitated. I was going to ask if you wanted to come with me. I need to grab something from the shed store. For the backyard. I looked at him for a moment. He didn't know. He couldn't. Not about the receipt. Not about the lipstick. Sure, I said, too quickly. Yeah, I'll come. The ride wasn't long, but it was quiet. He didn't try to fill the silence with small talk. I was grateful. We parked in front of a warehouse-style building, cheap red banner hanging crookedly over the windows, Labor Day discounts. Inside, rows of sheds lined the walls like lonely cabins. He walked ahead of me, looking at models, reading price tags, nodding to himself. I stood in the doorway of a small cedar one and finally spoke. Do you think people can fall out of love without even realizing it? He turned around slowly. I think sometimes people don't notice they were out of it to begin with. I looked down. The floor of the shed was uneven, creaked slightly beneath my shoes. I used to think it was just a rough patch, I said. And now? Now it feels like a long silence. Like we're just mouthing the words. He didn't answer right away. But he stepped into the shed and stood beside me. Maybe silence isn't always empty. Maybe it's space waiting to be filled. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't. We walked back to the register. He paid cash. I noticed he had a separate keychain now, one that didn't match the set from his old house. I wondered how long it had taken for him to feel like a guest in his own life. We carried the catalog and receipt back to the truck. As he slid behind the wheel, he looked at me again, this time longer. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I don't know how to fix it." The sun was low by the time we returned. Shadows stretched across the driveway. The house looked peaceful from the outside. Inside, it was anything but. My husband's car wasn't there. I felt my breath leave me without permission. Relief? Guilt? I couldn't tell. We stepped into the kitchen. I moved to put the catalog on the counter, but he touched my elbow, light, like he wasn't sure if he should. I turned toward him. And we kissed. Then I pulled away, instantly. My breath caught, my heartbeat racing in my throat. He didn't move. Didn't apologize. Just stood there, his eyes locked with mine, like he was waiting for me to speak first. But I couldn't. So I turned and walked upstairs, not looking back. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I came down early. He was already outside, trimming the hedges near the fence line. His back was turned. He moved like he was trying not to think. I poured coffee and sat in the kitchen, not drinking it. My husband came downstairs dressed too sharply for a casual day. No briefcase. No laptop. Just car keys and sunglasses. "Flying to Atlanta," he said. "Last minute. Couple days. Work." He smiled, too wide. "You know how it is." I didn't answer. He grabbed a breakfast bar again. No kiss. No contact. And then he was gone. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It pulsed. I stepped outside to tell him his son had left town. He looked up from the trimmer. "Again?" I nodded. He set the shears down, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Want to come to Walmart with me? I need mulch." I didn't want to be alone. So I said yes. The drive was quiet again, but the air between us was different. Tighter. Denser. In the garden aisle, we debated the difference between bark and red cedar. "He wouldn't notice," I said absently. "What? If I planted something? Or cut everything down?" "I don't think he'd notice." He looked at me hard. "That's not your fault." We paid. He loaded the bags into the truck bed while I climbed into the passenger seat. We didn't talk on the way back. But just before we pulled into the driveway, he reached over and turned off the radio. "I've been trying not to cross a line," he said. "But I don't know anymore if the line's even there." I didn't answer. I couldn't. That evening, I pulled out the hotel receipt again. This time, I flipped it over. On the back, in his handwriting, were 3 simple words. "Your turn next." Nothing else. No name. No date. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The handwriting wasn't my husband's. It was his father's. I stared at the handwriting on the back of the receipt for longer than I'd care to admit. I turned it over again and again, hoping I was wrong. But I knew that curve of the Y. The tilt of the T. It wasn't my husband's. It was his father's. And the words, "Your turn next," didn't sound like something my husband would write. Not even in one of his passive-aggressive moods. I shoved the receipt into the drawer under the cutlery, the one with old batteries, expired coupons, and mystery keys that opened nothing. I didn't want to look at it anymore. He was in the backyard when I walked out. Kneeling near the steps, working on the boards he'd promised to replace. It was late afternoon. Hot, sticky, thick with summer's last breath. I didn't say anything at first. Just stood at the edge of the porch and watched. The sound of the hammer echoed in my ears like a heartbeat. He paused, wiped his forehead with the inside of his arm, then looked up. "You all right?" I sat down on the step above him. "You left me a receipt." He froze. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. "What do you mean?" he asked, too casually. "You know what I mean." He sat back, resting his forearms on his knees. "I didn't think you'd look that close." "Why would you do that?" His voice dropped. "Because I knew he wouldn't." "But you would." The silence between us throbbed. "You set that up?" "I knew you'd find it. I knew he left it out for you to see." "But he didn't write anything." "I did." I felt the wind shift. My stomach turned. "You were trying to tell me something," I said. "No," he replied. "I was giving you permission." I stood and walked back inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't want to create more noise than I already carried inside me. That night, my husband called from his hotel. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Something about a delayed meeting, an extra night, maybe two. He said it like a weather update. No emotion. No apology. Just information. I didn't play it back. Instead, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a holiday that never came. Poured a glass. Sat at the table. He came in from the backyard, hands still dusty from the work. He didn't ask questions. Just poured himself a glass and sat down across from me. We didn't talk about the receipt. Or the voicemail. Or the way everything was slowly, inevitably cracking under its own weight. After dinner, we stood in the kitchen. I was rinsing the plates. He reached for one beside me. Our hands touched, brief, unplanned. I looked at him. He looked at me. We said nothing. Later that night, we spent night together. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet. Still. A strange calm sat over everything. He was asleep beside me, one hand loosely curled near his chest. I slipped out of bed carefully, pulled on a robe, and walked downstairs. The kitchen smelled like sleep and silence. I made coffee. Sat at the counter. Waited for guilt to come crashing in. It didn't. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy. Not free. But less buried. He came down a while later. Fully dressed, no trace of hesitation in his steps. He didn't kiss me. Didn't hug me. But he poured himself coffee and sat at the table like this was something normal people did on normal mornings. We talked about groceries. About light bulbs. About nothing. It was the most honest conversation I'd had in months. A few hours later, I got a text from my husband. Headed back late tonight. Don't wait up. I didn't respond. We cleaned the house. Trimmed the bushes out front. Fixed the squeaky hinge on the screen door. It was strange how productive things got when the truth finally dropped its mask. As the day faded, we made dinner together. Burgers. Nothing fancy. But it felt oddly grounding. He stood beside me at the grill while I chopped onions. You think he knows? I asked quietly. He knows something. The lights flickered on outside as the sky turned from orange to gray. After we ate, I loaded the dishwasher. He dried the pans. It was silent again, but not in a bad way. Just quiet. A new kind of quiet. Around 9, the headlights swept across the living room wall. My husband was home. I braced myself. But when the front door opened, he just walked in like nothing had changed. Tossed his keys on the counter, loosened his tie. Smells good. Burgers? Yeah, I said. There's some left. He grabbed a plate and popped it in the microwave. No questions. No suspicion. No flicker of anything unusual in his expression. His father came in from the porch, nodded at him, then walked upstairs like it was just another Tuesday. I watched my husband take the plate out, bite into the burger, chew, swallow, and then say, "You use that fancy sauce?" I nodded. He smiled. "You know I like that one." And then he walked out of the room. I stood there, stunned. It was like watching a show where the actors were playing the wrong roles. He wasn't suspicious. He wasn't distant. He was calm. Too calm. Something didn't feel right. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. I assumed he'd already left for work. But when I came downstairs, he was sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through something on his tablet. "Morning," he said. "Didn't expect you to still be here. Got a call. Flight to Boston in a couple hours. Figured I'd grab breakfast first." I poured coffee. My hands were shaking, but I hid it. He looked up at me, studied my face a little too long. Then smiled. "You sleep okay?" I nodded. "I always know when you don't," he added. "You get that little crease between your eyebrows." I forced a smile. He closed the tablet and stood. Walked over and kissed my forehead. "I'll call you when I land." And then he left. 5 minutes later, I walked into the kitchen and saw it. On the table. Alone. A piece of paper folded neatly in half. I opened it. Inside, in his handwriting. "Now we're even. Clean slate. See you soon." And beneath that, a printed screenshot. From a Walmart security camera. Date stamped. Clear as day. Me and his father, standing too close in the garden section. Faces turned toward each other. Smiling. No physical contact, but unmistakable. I dropped the paper. My legs gave out a little as I backed into the counter. He had known. The whole time. And he'd been waiting. Watching. Letting it happen. Or maybe, counting on it. I stared at the screenshot until my eyes blurred. Then I read the note again. "Now we're even. Clean slate. See you soon." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. He'd known. He'd planned for it. Not just accepted it, invited it. As if every moment, every word, every glance I thought I was hiding had already been accounted for. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hand. I tried to trace it all back, when he started watching, when he started waiting. Every delayed meeting, every trip out of town, every casually planted comment about needing space. It wasn't neglect. It was strategy. And I had played right into it. I heard footsteps on the stairs, steady, deliberate. He was coming down. I folded the paper fast, shoved it into the bread box, and stood just as his father entered the room. He glanced at me, paused. "You look pale." "I'm fine." He gave me a longer look, but didn't press. He went straight to the sink, filled a glass with water, then leaned against the counter. I couldn't stop looking at his face. Trying to read it. Wondering if he'd known too. If they were both in on it. But he looked tired. Unaware. I turned to the stove, busying myself with a skillet that wasn't even turned on. He spoke again. He gone? I nodded. Boston. Said he'd call. He never calls. That part was true. We stood in silence for a minute that felt much longer. Then he pushed off the counter and said he was heading to the hardware store again, something about the gutter brackets being too rusted to ignore. I told him I'd catch up later. He left. I waited until I heard the door close. Then I pulled the paper out of the bread box and folded it smaller, tighter, like making it smaller might dull the sting. I didn't know what to do with it, so I stuffed it into the junk drawer again, under a dead flashlight and a roll of measuring tape. Then I sat in the silence. That silence used to feel hollow. Now it felt like pressure. By noon, I forced myself up. I needed groceries. Something normal. Something that would let me stand under fluorescent lights and pretend to be someone else for 30 minutes. The store was half empty. Just retirees comparing cereal prices and one distracted mom pushing a cart with a squeaky wheel. I drifted through the aisles without a list. Picked up things I didn't need: honey mustard, crackers we never ate, 2 kinds of yogurt. At the checkout, I saw her. The woman who'd borrowed my lipstick. She was behind me in line, holding a single bottle of wine and a pack of gum. When our eyes met, she smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Hey, stranger," she said. I forced a smile. "Hi." She tilted her head. "You look good. Like you've been sleeping better." I swallowed. "Busy week." She laughed. "Tell me about it." And then she paid and walked off, leaving her perfume hanging in the air like a slap. I drove home in silence. Didn't unpack the groceries. Just set the bags on the counter and walked straight outside. He was up on the ladder, adjusting a piece of gutter with a wrench. When he saw me, he climbed down. "Everything okay?" he asked. "No." He looked at me. Waited. "I saw her," I said. He nodded, slowly. "Which one?" I didn't answer. "You think he knew from the beginning?" I asked. "I think he started checking out long before you noticed." "And you?" He looked down at the ground, then back up. "I didn't plan for any of this." "But you still helped him," I said. "You left that note." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I wasn't helping him. I was trying to give you control." My voice dropped. "By riding in his game?" He stepped forward. "I'm not playing any games." We stood there, a few feet apart, in the middle of our torn-up backyard, the sun beating down like an interrogation lamp. "I need space," I said. He nodded. "I'll head out. Tonight." I didn't stop him. Inside, I finally unpacked the groceries. Set everything in the fridge. Put the crackers in the pantry. And then I opened the dishwasher to start loading plates from last night's dinner. That's when I found it. Not a dish. Not a note. A manila envelope. Sitting in the bottom rack. Dry. Hidden. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were printed forms. Legal documents. Property paperwork. Signatures at the bottom. I scanned the lines once, then again. It wasn't from my husband. It was from him, his father. He had added himself to the deed of the house. Years ago. Long before he moved in. It had been signed, notarized, filed. My name. His name. No one else. No mention of my husband. I stood frozen, the papers trembling in my hands. This wasn't recent. This had been sitting, waiting. Not for drama. Not for betrayal. For a future I hadn't even seen forming. I dropped the envelope on the counter and stepped back like it was about to explode. I didn't know what any of this meant. Not yet. But I knew one thing. My husband had left me breadcrumbs. But someone else had already laid the foundation. I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I laid in bed with the envelope on my chest, reading and rereading every line until the words blurred and turned into patterns. The legalese wasn't hard to decipher. The dates were clear. The ink was dry. My name. His. No trace of my husband. No mistake. It wasn't a technicality. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a plan. By morning, my mind was still spinning, but my feet moved on instinct. I needed answers. Not guesses. Not assumptions. Real ones. I walked into the backyard. He wasn't there. The shed door was open, tools laid out like he'd started a project and walked away mid-task. I checked the driveway, his truck was gone. No note. No word. I didn't wait. I packed a bag, shoved the envelope inside, grabbed my keys, and drove. It took 3 hours to get there. Through 2 counties and a stretch of back road that felt like a tunnel I couldn't come back from. The GPS glitched twice, rerouted me both times, but eventually I pulled up to the quiet street I hadn't visited in over a year. Savannah. The city had always felt like a postcard. Too polished, too staged. But now it looked foreign. Plastic. I parked 2 blocks away from the address I remembered. A duplex with mint shutters and a porch swing no one used. I stood outside for a long time before walking up. Every step felt too loud. I knocked. No answer. I waited. Knocked again. Eventually the door creaked open. It wasn't my husband. It was her. She blinked like she wasn't sure if I was real. "Hi," I said, flatly. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "He's not here," she said. "He left an hour ago." "Where?" She shrugged. "Didn't say." "Did he live here?" "For a while." "And now?" She looked down. "Now I don't know. He comes and goes." I didn't respond. I turned to leave. But she stopped me. "He always said you were smarter than he expected." I kept walking. Got in the car. Slammed the door harder than I meant to. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes before I saw a small cafe on a corner, empty patio, cracked paint on the sign. I parked, walked in, and ordered coffee I wouldn't drink. Then I pulled out the envelope again. I laid the papers on the table one by one. There was a quiet logic to them. A rhythm. Each signature a confirmation that nothing I believed about my life was true anymore. My phone buzzed. A message from him. "Not my husband. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen. He didn't know I had found the documents. He didn't know where I was. I typed back, "Where are you?" A pause. Then, "At the house." "I thought you were upstairs." I replied, "I need to talk." "Meet me halfway." No question. No delay. "Tell me where." We chose a gas station off the interstate. Middle of nowhere. Middle of everything. I beat him there by 10 minutes. Waited outside near the vending machines. The air smelled like exhaust and fried food. I watched the cars pull in, refill, disappear. Then he arrived. He stepped out of the truck, walked toward me slowly. We didn't hug. Didn't speak. I held up the envelope. He exhaled. Quietly. You found it. You hid it. I didn't know when or how to tell you. Why was it done in the first place? He glanced down at the pavement. Before you even moved in, your husband asked me to help co-sign the loan. I said no. I didn't want my name on anything with his. He offered a different arrangement, said I could invest and protect part of the property if I ever needed it. And you agreed? At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need it. But now? Now I'm not sure if I protected myself or made it worse. We stood there, cars humming in and out of the lot. You weren't supposed to stay, I said. You were just visiting. I didn't know how to leave. We sat on the curb beside the truck. People passed by, not looking. Just two strangers having a conversation that would reshape everything. He's been planning this for months, I said. Yes. And you helped him? No. You left the note. To give you agency. To say, you don't have to stay trapped. I turned to him. But you already owned half the trap. He didn't respond. We drove back in separate cars. The sun was setting by the time I reached the house. His truck wasn't far behind. The street was quiet. The porch light was already on. Inside, the house felt still. Hollowed out. We barely spoke that evening. We made dinner like we had the night before, but everything was off. Measured. Guarded. A performance. As we washed the dishes, he asked quietly, "What now?" I don't know yet. He dried his hands, nodded once, and walked upstairs without another word. I sat at the table, lights dim, eyes locked on the front door. 2 hours later, it opened. My husband walked in, suitcase in one hand, fast food bag in the other. He smiled like he was coming home from vacation. Miss me? He didn't wait for an answer. Just set the bag on the table and started unpacking. I watched him move through the house like nothing had changed. He noticed the documents still sitting near the fruit bowl. He paused. Smirked. Guess you've been busy. Then he leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes on me. You didn't think I'd let this place go so easily, did you? I didn't respond. He picked up the envelope, waved it slightly. This was my idea. You just walked through it. You're not on the papers. I didn't need to be. Why? Because I already signed my part away. Months ago. To her. He didn't have to say who. I already knew. You never wanted this house, I whispered. No. I wanted an exit that didn't make me the villain. And what am I? He shrugged. Collateral. Then he smiled. But now it's your turn to choose. He turned and left the kitchen, calling up the stairs as he went. I'm home. The sound of footsteps echoed above. Then another voice answered. I know. He didn't come down that night. Neither of them did. I stayed in the kitchen, alone with the glow of the overhead light and the echo of that final word. I know. I kept waiting for something more. A door slamming. Footsteps on the stairs. A confrontation. But nothing came. The stillness made it worse. By morning, the air was heavy and stale. I hadn't slept. The suitcase was still near the door where he'd left it. The fast food bag on the table was untouched. I moved through the kitchen like it was someone else's home. Boiled water for coffee. Burned a slice of toast. My hands shook, but I didn't feel anything. Eventually, I went upstairs. I passed the bedroom. The door was open. Empty. I passed the guest room. The door was closed. I didn't knock. Instead, I walked to the small room at the end of the hall, the one we used for storage, boxes still half-packed from years ago. I pulled one down, opened it. Legal pads. Receipts. One torn folder labeled House, 2009. I sat on the floor and started reading. Everything was there. The original title transfer. The refinance documents. A notarized statement naming my husband's father as co-owner. A post-it note in my husband's handwriting, this is just in case. Don't overthink it. He'd planned every angle. I put the folder aside and got dressed. Jeans, old boots, a jacket that still smelled like autumn. I called a rideshare and left my car in the driveway. At the law office downtown, I waited in a plastic chair under a dusty ceiling fan. The attorney came out 10 minutes later, gray-haired, polite, efficient. I showed him the papers. Told him the situation. Left out everything that wasn't legal. He reviewed them slowly. Then again. You're on the deed, he said. So is your husband's father. But your husband isn't. I know. He paused. And you're sure this wasn't done without your consent? It wasn't. Then you're not legally obligated to give up anything. Not without a court order. What happens if all three of us want different things? He folded his hands. Then it becomes very, very expensive. I thanked him and left. I didn't go home. I walked instead, blocks, maybe miles, I don't know. Past the park with the cracked fountain, past a bakery that used to be a post office, past a mural half-painted by kids who never finished it. When I finally made it back, it was dusk again. His truck was gone. My husband's car was in the driveway. Inside, he was in the living room, watching a basketball game on mute, one leg crossed casually over the other. I walked past him. He didn't speak. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge. Poured a glass of water. Drank it slowly. Then I turned and saw him standing in the doorway, arms folded. So, he said. Had time to think? I didn't answer. He smiled. This thing, you and him. It's cute. I said nothing. But let's be honest. You were never going to leave. You just wanted to feel something again. Still nothing. He stepped forward, picked up the house keys from the counter. You know, he said, tossing them lightly, when I signed this place away, it wasn't out of love. It was out of strategy. I knew you'd fight to keep it. And I knew he'd help you. I stared at him. So you walked out on purpose. I walked out to make room. And you filled it exactly like I expected. He leaned closer. The best way to win is to lose publicly. That way, everyone roots for you when you come back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the glass. But I didn't move. He backed away, grin still plastered across his face. You're not going to throw me out, he said. You can't. Because then you'd have to admit what you did. He walked away. I stood frozen. Later that night, I sat in the backyard under the broken porch light, knees pulled to my chest, a blanket around my shoulders. The air was cool. Too quiet. Then I heard the truck. Headlights swept across the yard. He parked at the curb. Sat for a moment. Then got out and walked toward me. I didn't know he was coming back, he said. I know. He sat on the steps beside me. I'll leave. I should have done it sooner. I didn't reply. He stood, stepped down off the porch. But before he reached the gate, I said it. He thinks he won. He turned. Did he? I don't know. He walked back slowly. Sat beside me again. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. Just the weight of everything that had come undone. Eventually, I went inside. He stayed on the porch. Upstairs, my husband was asleep in our bed. I lay down beside him. But I didn't close my eyes. In the morning, I woke early. Both vehicles were still outside. I went downstairs, made coffee. The house was quiet. Normal. Pretending. At noon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, expecting a delivery. A neighbor. It was neither. A woman stood there. Young. Early 20s. Nervous. Hi, she said. I'm sorry to just show up, but I think I need to talk to someone. I think I need to talk to the man who lives here. Which one? I asked. She looked confused. The older one. The one who, he's my father. I think. My mom told me his name a few weeks ago. I've been trying to find him. The porch swayed slightly under my feet. I opened my mouth. But no words came. She stood on the porch, arms crossed over a worn hoodie, eyes flickering between hope and fear. The silence between us stretched out longer than it should have. I knew I had to say something, but my mouth had forgotten how words worked. Behind me, the house remained still. No footsteps. No voices. No signs of the storm about to break. Come in, I finally said. She hesitated, then stepped inside slowly, her hands tucked tightly in the sleeves of her sweatshirt. She moved like someone stepping into a memory that didn't belong to her. I led her to the kitchen and gestured to a chair. She sat. I poured water into a glass and set it in front of her. She didn't touch it. My mom said she met him once. A long time ago. Said she wasn't even sure he knew. Her voice was thin, like it was trying to hold itself together. But she wrote his name down. Told me to find him if I ever wanted to. I nodded, even though my brain was spinning too fast to process any of it. Does he live here? She asked. Still? I didn't answer. I walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. I knocked lightly. He opened the door almost instantly, like he'd been waiting behind it. His face changed the moment he saw mine. Not fear. Not confusion. Something else. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at him. His hands gripped the sides of the doorway. Then she said it. I think you're my father. He didn't move. He didn't blink. For a moment, I wasn't sure he was breathing. I turned and walked away. Back to the kitchen. Back to the chair she had just left. I sat there and listened as silence stretched above me, pressing against the ceiling like the weight of another world. Eventually, I heard movement. Footsteps on the stairs. Then 2 sets. Slow. Careful. They entered the room together. He looked at me first. I didn't ask anything. I didn't need to. I need to talk to her, he said quietly. I nodded and left them alone. I stepped out onto the back porch, the sun already slipping toward the edge of the sky. The garden looked still, untouched. But I could feel the shift. The ground beneath everything was moving again, slowly, deliberately. I sat on the steps and waited. Half an hour passed. Maybe more. When I came back inside, she was gone. He was sitting at the table, staring at the glass of water she hadn't touched. "I didn't know," he said. "I believe you. She didn't want anything from me. Not money. Not explanation. She just wanted to see my face. And now?" He exhaled slowly. "Now she's seen it. And I have to decide what to do with that." Neither of us spoke for a while. The light in the kitchen had dimmed, but neither of us reached for the switch. Then I said what had been burning in my chest all day. "He came back because he wanted to win." He nodded. "He came back because he thought you were ready to lose." I stood. Walked to the cabinet. Took out the envelope, the one with the documents, the proof, the signatures, the deal behind the curtain. I placed it on the table. He looked at it but didn't touch it. "You still want to leave?" I asked. "I don't know anymore." "What do you want?" He paused. "I want to stop pretending we didn't wreck everything." "And then?" "I want to stop pretending it wasn't worth it." The front door opened. We both turned. My husband walked in, jacket over his shoulder, like he'd just returned from another business trip that never existed. He saw us both at the table. Saw the envelope between us. Saw the half-empty glass of water. Then he smiled. "That was fast," he said. "She didn't stay long." I didn't move. Neither did he. My husband walked to the counter, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water. Took a slow sip. "You didn't ask who she was," I said. He shrugged. "Didn't need to. I know who she was." "You knew?" "She emailed me 2 weeks ago. Asked about him." I gave her the address. I felt everything inside me go still. "You wanted her to show up." He smiled. "Everyone deserves answers. Except me." "No," he said. "You already got yours." He placed the water on the counter. Straightened his jacket. Picked up his keys. Then he looked directly at him. "Congratulations," he said. "You've inherited more than just my mess." He walked toward the door. I expected him to stop. To say something else. But he didn't. He opened the door. And then turned back, just once. "This whole time," he said, "you thought you were playing against me." He looked at me. But I wasn't even in the game anymore. The door closed. And just like that, he was gone. Not loudly. Not violently. Just gone. We didn't move. The kitchen was too quiet. Outside, the sky turned a color I didn't have a name for. I sat down. He sat across from me. We didn't say a word. Because what could we say? Everything was finished. And nothing was over.